and they would say the angels lie. So those I can never solve or satisfy. We put $6.5 billion additional dollars. We allowed those senators from the Gang of Eight who come from border states largely to devise this. You know, I would simply say to our colleagues, we are open. If you want greater specificity about what that border plan looks like, we're open to that. But what we cannot have and what I cannot support and what I believe the community cannot support at the end of the day is that we're going to have triggers that can never be achieved in terms of border security as an impediment to the pathway to legalization and citizenship.
Senator Menedez from New Jersey, welcome back to the Steve Malzberg Show. And he was speaking to Candy Crowley, I believe, on CNN. State of the Union, and we welcome in, we're going to do that next cut too, Will. We welcome in Ron Christie, former White House senior advisor and founder of Christie Strategies. Good to have you back, sir. How are you, Ron?
I'm doing well, Steve. It's nice to join you again.
Thank you. I want you to hear the next cut because I'm getting so sick and tired of this. It's almost comical. Listen to Bob Menendez here.
And I would tell my Republican colleagues, both in the House and the Senate, that the road to the White House comes to a road with a pathway to legalization. Without it, there'll never be a road to the White House for the Republican Party.
Isn't that nice? Isn't it so generous that all these Democrats want to give Republicans free advice, whether it's their stance on abortion, or whether it's their stance on traditional marriage, and especially now their stance on immigration reform? They're telling them how to win the White House. I mean, maybe the RNC should start paying people like Bob Menendez.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, first of all, where do we start, Steve? I mean, what an obnoxious statement from an obnoxious senator. The notion that the United States Senate is going to pass a bill that would give amnesty to 12 million people who, a lot of these folks aren't very highly skilled. A lot of these people will immediately go on government assistance, regardless of what Senator Rubio says about, oh, you know, you can't get benefits and you can't get anything from the government. For what end? It's all about politics. The notion that this Congress, if they've learned anything from 1986, is when the Congress, when President Reagan signed a amnesty bill into law, they said they were going to secure the border. They didn't do it then. They're not going to do it now. This is a terrible piece of legislation.
No, absolutely. And I just had Byron York on from the Washington Examiner, and he agrees, and I want to hear from you if you agree. No matter how far the Republicans go, no matter what bill passes, if a bill passes, stuff is going to be left out that they will not go for, like Pat Leahy's amendment on gay, immigrants and all that. So no matter how far it goes, there's going to be things left out of there, and either the day the bill is signed or right before the midterm elections as ammunition, the Democrats will once again portray Republicans as being anti-immigration, anti-Hispanic, xenophobic, and God knows what else, because they didn't let this in the bill and they didn't let that in the bill. So even though the Republicans will have caved, 75, 80, 90%, they're going to be right back where they think they are now, which is portrayed as being against Hispanics, and they're not against Hispanics, and Hispanics don't consider this the number one issue. But do you agree that no matter how far they go, they will be the villain in this at the end?
No question about it. I mean, if it's one thing that we've seen for those on the left, they love playing the race card. If you're against President Obama, well, that's not based on principled opposition. You're racist. So if somehow the Republicans don't bend to every last demand by the Democrats to allow amnesty, to allow people to get benefits, to allow them to do goodness knows what, then the Republicans are going to be called racist. And, Steve, one thing I just point out, I look back at 1986, and I remember that when Ronald Reagan ran in 1984, he got 37% of the Hispanic vote. After that amnesty bill in 1986, when he ran for re-election in 1988, it went down to 30% of the Hispanic vote. So you're right. This notion that somehow if Republicans vote for an immigration bill, that they're going to somehow get the support of the Hispanic community, I think is ludicrous.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I got to tell you, I don't know what the Republican Party is drinking. I really don't. Let's talk about, we're talking to Ron Christie here on the Steve Malzberg Show. For the first time in his presidency, according to a CNN poll, less than half of respondents believe Barack Obama is honest. And in the same poll, Barack Obama's approval rating down 8 points from May to 45% from 53, which is in 1 month, and you know polling better than me, a huge drop. And of course, it's got to be and well, let's go overall. Then we'll get to the numbers inside the poll. But it has to be all scandal.
It is all scandal, and I think the scandal that probably hurt the president the most was the fact that his Justice Department named Fox News reporter James Rosen as a co-conspirator for a criminal act. The bloom is off the rose, Steve, and now I think the national media is looking at this president. They're looking at him with a critical eye for the first time in the last 5 years, and I think now that the stories have gotten out about the various scandals and the American people are actually hearing this on mainstream outlets, of course his numbers are going to drop because the press was largely, covering for him for these last 5 years. So it doesn't surprise me at all. What will be interesting as we head into the summer months, people are out, they're on vacation, but when we come back in the fall, the president's ability to really have a significant voice on legislation in the Congress, I think, has been irreparably damaged.
Well, which speaks to immigration again, why the Republicans would do anything that Barack Obama wants and can claim as victory in this climate with these scandals, so much unanswered and such a lack of cooperation on the part of the administration is so beyond me. That's why I just wish we had all new leadership. But let me get to some of the internals here. Independents' approval of the president dropped 10 points to 37%, and disapproval was up 12 points to 61%. I mean, we're talking about a 22-point swing. Huge
blow to the president right now, given the fact that he won re-election largely on the shoulders of the independent voters. Now that they've abandoned him, now that they have viewed his presidency as being somewhat of one where he's very hands-off as opposed to engaged, this again shows you that the Democrats are in really, really poor position heading into the midterm election. If you think the 2010 election cycle, the midterms where the Republicans really crushed the Democrats as a repudiation of Obamacare was something, I think the one to watch is going to be the 2014 midterms. This president's ability to lead has been significantly compromised, and it's all been of his own doing.
Right. And Ron, of course, in the midterms, only those who are motivated really come out traditionally. And so the young vote really doesn't play into it. But with voters ages 18 to 29, Obama's approval numbers dropped 17 points. And 18 to 34, it's down to 48% approval and 50% disapproval. And the young voters, that's Obama's bag.
Yeah, but as you and I both know, hope and change doesn't get you a job. Hope and change hasn't created millions of new jobs that were promised. Hope and change has frankly been a failure that I think a lot of younger voters who were very much in favor of the president, very enthusiastic both for his election and re-election, have now realized that his policies not only are not helping, but they're hurting the country and they're hurting them in particular.
All right, we're talking to Ron Christie, former White House senior advisor and founder of Christie Strategies, here on the Steve Malzberg Show. Okay, let me throw you a scenario, and you could laugh at me as Byron York did, or you could say as Charlie Hurt did last week when I was the first one to say it. I still believe I'll probably be the only one to say it until it ever happens, if it does happen. Okay, so Chris Christie, with all his actions, with the Senate race, with the embracing Obama twice, the whole thing, and then he had the chance to put a Republican senator in the Senate for till next November. Of 14, didn't do it. Going to be a Democrat in there. He shunned a conservative forum last weekend to attend the Clinton Initiative, Global Initiative, and sit down on a stage and be hugged by Bill Clinton and interviewed by him in Chicago. He went to that instead. I don't see Chris Christie having a path to the Republican nomination at all. I don't see Chris Christie. I don't see anybody having an independent path. I just don't think he would mount that. I think it's just too complicated, and especially against Hillary Clinton. And he's not going to run as a Democrat, switch parties, and run against Hillary Clinton. So what about this? What about Chris Christie accepts, whether they call it a unity party or whether they don't call it anything, and he never changes his affiliation, or he does change his affiliation to Democrat? What if he's the number 2 on a Hillary ticket?
Wow. That's an interesting thought. We'll put it this way. As we discussed last week, there is nothing that Chris Christie's oversized ego wouldn't consider. So while Byron York, my good friend, may have said that will never happen.
No, he didn't. He chuckled, but I don't know if he was mocking me, but he thought it was funny. But
yeah.
Do you think it's got any credence whatsoever?
I don't see how he does it, Steve. I think he is really intent on running as a Republican. I think he believes that the national polls have him being the most competitive Republican out there. I just don't see him leaving the party. But again, his ego is not to be underestimated. And if he thought that was the way that he could not only get into the vice presidency and then ultimately run for president himself as an independent, I wouldn't put it past him.
Or ultimately just run for whatever, however he wants to. And once he's vice president, he probably thinks it's he'll just coast, and he's young. Yeah. Anyway, just a thought, but I'm telling everybody so you could all remember you heard it here first, and you could all go around the country telling everybody that I said it. But anyway, Ron.